Waiheke Island. Just gonna share my window here. And we're continuing on reading from the Introduction to Bhagavad Gita. We ended up with Jai Srila Prabhu yesterday reading. I'll take these headphones out. Jai Srila Prabhu was reading about the qualities of Lord Krishna. And I want to make sure that everyone can hear, so I'm going to quickly go onto Facebook and check. Okay, let's have a quick look. Krishna Gita Auckland. And see if we have some sound. You can see my picture. No, that's not it. Here we go. Yep, okay, great. Just going to share quickly, go onto Facebook and check. Okay, fantastic. So let's continue reading. So yeah, we were hearing about the qualities of Krishna yesterday when Jai Srila Prabhu was giving the class. And this is from the 10th canto, 10th chapter of Gita. There's the famous seed slokas, starting with Aham Savasya Prabhavo, describing about the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, the source of everything, and that the devotees of the Lord, they devote their lives to him and spend all their time talking about him. That's what we're trying to do here. And they fully devote their lives to Krishna, and in that way Krishna gives them the inspiration and the intelligence about how to come back to Krishna, to revive their dormant Krishna consciousness. I'm thinking of the final verse. Yes, he arises within the heart and gives transcendental knowledge. So following these seed slokas, then Krishna describes, then Arjuna describes the qualities of Krishna, which is what we heard last time. And then it's very interesting that Arjuna makes a point here in this 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that, I'll just read. This part that we're going to read now is referring to that next section. After describing Krishna's qualities, this is what Arjuna makes this point. So, Prabhupada speaking. Actually, I'm jumping straight into the Bhagavad Gita, but let us do a little bit of the chanting first. So I've just set the scene from where Jai Srila Prabhu was teaching before, and now we'll just pause and we'll do Jai Radha Madhava for a few moments. Just open this up and there we go. Okay, so we'll just turn this off for a second. Okay. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari, Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari, Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parirajikacharya Astotra Shadashish Mata Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gaur Gopinath Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Ki Jai. Navadvip Mahapodan Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. So we're continuing to read from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're continuing on the section of the introduction where Prabhupada is referring to chapter 10. Jai Srila Prabhu yesterday was speaking about the qualities of Krishna. This is where Arjuna is giving a list of qualities. Just flip back here. So this list of qualities is here. Just quickly read them out. Why not? Param Brahma, the Supreme Brahman. Param Dharma, the supreme rest or abode of everything. Pavitram, pure. Purusham, supreme enjoyer. Shashvatam, eternal. Divyam, transcendental. Adidevam, the original supreme personality of Godhead. Ajam, unborn. Vibhom, the greatest. All right, so now after Arjuna described these qualities in Bhagavad Gita, then let's see what Prabhupada has to say about that. Now, one may think that because Krishna was the friend of Arjuna, Arjuna was telling him all this by way of flattery. But Arjuna, just to drive out this kind of doubt from the minds of the readers of Bhagavad Gita, substantiates these praises in the next verse when he says that Krishna is accepted as the supreme personality of Godhead, not only by himself, but by authorities like Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyas. These are great personalities who distribute the Vedic knowledge who distribute the Vedic knowledge as it is accepted by all acharyas. Therefore, Arjuna tells Krishna that he accepts whatever he says to be completely perfect. Right, so this is a very important point, and this is, what's the word? Is it humanetics? I think could be the word. Let me just Google that. Don't even know if I can spell it, but let's give it a try. Humanetics. I'm sure Google will help us figure out what it is. Okay, so according to Google, hermeneutics is the study of the general principles of biblical interpretation. Okay. In a contemporary sense, unrelated to religion, hermeneutics refers to, I'll just turn my picture off. Yeah, so this is very important, this section. Why is it so wide? Can't really see it properly there. Let's try again. Okay, I'll just shrink the screen to make it a bit easier. That might help. There we go. That's reasonable, isn't it? Okay. So this is about epistemology. How do we know what's true? In fact, there's a joke that I think Urmila Mataji shared one time, and it was, what is epistemology? The student is asking a teacher, what is epistemology? And then the student answered, how would I know? So in writing, it's more clever because you have to take the interpretation out of it. But that is what epistemology is. How do we know what we know? What is our basis for determining what is true and what is not true? So here Arjuna is giving us a hint about what the Vedic principle is of understanding what is true and what is not true. And that principle is hearing from the correct authorities. It's also described that there's two ways of understanding knowledge. There is ascending knowledge and descending knowledge. Ascending knowledge is when we experiment for ourselves, where we do something and we observe the result. So this is what's known as the scientific method. We have a theory. I think it could be like this. Let me see. And then we try the experiment and we get the result. And in this way, we're able to judge if our theory was true or not. So in Krishna consciousness, this can be applied. Devotee tells us, you read Bhagavad Gita every day and you chant Hare Krishna every day and you'll be happy. So we try this method, we chant, and we find it gives us a good feeling, a happy feeling. And so then it gives us the faith to continue on the further stages of devotional service. So it starts off with Ado Shraddha. We have some kind of theory that maybe we can be open to some experiment. And then we have association of a devotee who says, hey, try this experiment. So Ado Shraddha, Tatu Sadhu Sangha. So with that association, from that association, we have an idea to try the experiment. And then Bhajana Kriya, we engage in this process of devotional service. And we start to experience that, actually, this shows promise. Let me continue. And of course, there's the micro and the macro. We might start out we get a book, we start reading. Wow, we get a taste just from reading. Or we get a taste just from that sadhu sangha. We meet that devotee and think, wow, that was a pretty far out person. They had something special. Haven't noticed that before. And so it inspires us to take up the process. And then we go to the next stage. We start to chant. Oh, wow, yeah, this is actually showing some promise here. So we can get some immediate results. And then we go to the next stage, which is Anata Navriti. And this is where it can become a little bit more challenging. We find that impurities from our heart may come up and we have to address them. And this is where we face the challenge. But as we look back over time, we can look back and see, well, yeah, although I'm not perfect, through Krishna consciousness, I've been able to make progress. I've been able to give up a lot of bad habits. So on an immediate scale, we can do something and get a taste. And then we can also see the longer term effects of something and get the results from this process of devotional service. So this is the ascending process, and it has its validity. We can have our direct experience. It's also described in the Bhagavad Gita that this is the king of knowledge. It is the supreme secret, and that it is experience. I might be muddling up my verses here, but anyway, it's joyfully performed and it's experience. We can have a realization. We can have a realization about this process of Krishna consciousness. It's not just something that we blindly believe without an experience. We can actually tangibly have realization. Yeah, it's experience through realization. So that process is there. But even more important is the process of descending knowledge, realized, where we hear from realized souls. So in this case, Arjuna is explaining that what he is talking about is not his own speculation or even just his own experience, but he's confirming that this experience, one minute, he's confirming that these ideas that he's sharing are the experience of the great souls in the past, the great Vedic authorities, the people who have shown through their character and their understanding of the scripture that they are worthy of hearing from. So, of course, we can trace back further. Why would we trust these people and why should we trust the Vedic knowledge? We can keep going back and back. And these are good questions. Who do we accept as an authority? So Arjuna has chosen these people because they, first of all, accept the Vedic knowledge. And that's a big discussion in itself. Why do we accept the Vedic knowledge? Jiva Goswami has described this in great detail in Tattva Sandarbha. And there's a really great lecture which I've been referred to, I haven't listened to yet. It's on very close to the top of my next to listen to list. It was recently, I think, Jiva Goswami's appearance day, and Radhika Raman's video about Tattva Sandarbha was shared. And the conclusion of Tattva Sandarbha is that Srimad Bhagavatam is the ultimate authority. We understand that the Vedas are the perfect source of knowledge, and of all the Vedas, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit. And if there's any contradiction between scriptures, the Srimad Bhagavatam should be accepted as the highest authority. So nowadays, there's a lot of emphasis on, the scientific process. If someone describes you as anti-science, then that's considered a great insult. And what they mean by that is typically that we should accept the authorities who are generally accepted in the mainstream scientific community. It's an interesting statement in itself, because the nature of science in the modern sense of it is the ascending process. That is a theory and it is tested, and if the experimentation indicates that the theory is likely to be true, then it's accepted until it's disproven by another theory and experimentation. So the nature of the ascending process is that it's never a done deal. It's always waiting for the next upgrade. Whereas the knowledge of Krishna consciousness is eternal, and it doesn't get changed by new revelation, by new experimentation. That it's actually been revealed by the creator of this whole universe and this universal system, and therefore it stays true through all times and places. And in general, the focus of these scriptures is on the eternal principles that will guide us regardless of changes in technology or different circumstances. And even then, it describes the structure of the universe, the key principles by which the whole world is operating, even the time scale and the different ages, the winter age, the spring, the autumn. What comes after winter comes autumn, No, after winter comes spring. Yeah, winter, spring, summer, and then fall or autumn. And so we're in the Kali Yuga at the moment, and the scriptures describe the qualities of the people in this age and the values that people will have, and even describes what life will be like. It's describing that by the end of Kali Yuga, people will be very small. They will not live much longer than the 20 years old or something like that. There'll be people will even be eating their own children for food because there's a shortage of foodstuffs and so on. So this is the extreme point of Kali Yuga. That sex life will be everything. If someone can just maintain a relationship with the opposite sex, they're considered a great hero, and so on. So these scriptures go into great detail about spiritual and material aspects of life. But the ultimate goal is how to get out of it and go back to Krishna. And so therefore our bias should always be, what does Shastra say? What does Srimad Bhagavatam say when looking at any particular issues? This should be our key point. And then if we don't have full details about how to address the situation, then we need to look at the more circumstantial situation, like our personal experience, our scientific experimentation, what that shows us, and so on. But ultimately, our Vedic scriptures has the ultimate understanding. And it's very interesting that there's some understandings that we have today that are, in terms of modern science, that are at odds, at least it would appear, with the traditional Vedic understanding. For example, in traditional cultures, the understanding of health is based on the Tridhatu, the three elements of the human body: bile, mucus, and air. And when there's an imbalance in these three doshas, then that produces bad health. Whereas in the modern understanding, there's more of an idea of, there's a similar kind of concept in modern science as well, of hormonal balance and in nutrition, different types of nutrients, micro and macronutrition, and so on. But there's a strong emphasis these days emphasizing about infection. And in traditional cultures, there wasn't really this concept. This idea of a germ theory is something which has become prominent in the last few centuries. It's kind of a new idea. So rather than the idea that there's something out there that's very dangerous that will attack our body, the understanding is that when our body is healthy, everything is in balance. But when it goes out of balance, it manifests through different diseases. So this is interesting distinction between the traditional view and the modern view. So that's something to try to reconcile and understand. Well, when the modern science says that we're infected by a disease, but then the Vedic concept is saying it's just an imbalance. And how does it work? Because it seems that sick people are, when they associate together, they make other people sick. It seems to be an infection and so on. So, this is an interesting idea to look into. And of course, another one is the Vedic universe, where in the traditional description of the I'll just stick up. There's a comment by Bhakti, so I may as well stick that up on the screen. How do we do that? There's a button here. There we go. Here's a comment. It says that scientists are correct in saying that hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, even according to the Vedas. Okay. Cool. That's an interesting comment. So I think it's gone off now. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Yeah, so there are obviously, if we take it that the Vedic knowledge is true, then there should be some reconciliation between the modern view and the traditional view, although sometimes there may appear to be contradictions. So just like the universe is one of those points where the modern view of the universe is that there's basically this endless vacuum, and it has no limit and it just keeps expanding. And that these balls, these planets floating around in this empty void, basically, that was produced by accident. Whereas in the Vedic understanding, each universe is understood to be like a globe, just like a mustard seed, and compared to the body of Lord Vishnu. That as Lord Vishnu breathes in and out, these universes are coming, or even from the pores of his body, these little spherical universes are coming out. And compared to his body, they're tiny, and that there's unlimited universes. The modern understanding is all we know is what we see, and we can't see to any other universes. So there's no understanding that there could be other universes. All that we know is what we see, this universe. But the Vedas say that no, this is just one universe out of so many universes. And there are even different sizes of universes, and this is considered a small universe. Lord Brahma only has 4 heads. In other universes, Lord Brahma has many more than 4 heads. So these are mind-boggling things which can never be known by science. It can only be known by revelation. And also the description of the universe is totally different from the understanding of modern science. Like, it's describing that there's like this disk called Bhumandala, and in the middle of this disk there's a big mountain, and surrounding that mountain there are what's the word, oceans and islands and things like that. So Arjuna Prabhu on his channel, Theology Unleashed, was doing an interview with a devotee called Sulabha from Australia, and he studied into these things quite a lot, trying to understand what, not just Srimad Bhagavatam, but other Puranas, how they've described the universe in terms of these islands and oceans and things. So this is quite different from the description of the modern times. And then, as well as having this plane, or this sphere, no, what do you call it? Disk of Bhumandala plane, there are different levels above and below. So there's like the hellish regions below, planes, and above that there's the planes of the very advanced spiritual personalities, as well as the heavenly planets. So this is quite different from the Vedic understanding, but there's some elements that are in common as well. Sadaputa Prabhu has done some interesting comparisons, looking at the way that the universe is described in the Puranas, and he's looked at it that you can look at it from one perspective, that it's describing India and the regions surrounding India, expanding from there. You can look at it from the point of view of what was the other point that he looked at it from? India itself, and then you can expand that out to the whole globe, and then you can also look at it from the point of view of the solar system, with the different planets and the sun and the moon rotating around. So in this way, he was trying to reconcile the understanding of the modern science with the, we could say, modern science and what we observe with the traditional presentation of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, of course, that brings in the controversy: is the Earth flat or is it a globe? There seems to be a lot of evidence both ways, and there's people that are convinced both ways. I haven't studied it enough to sort of put my hat on any camp as yet. But it seems that there are certainly elements of both that seem to be true. There's evidence that you can see in both ways. And the Vedic scriptures seem to describe things from different angles of vision, and it's hard to understand it. Anyway, the point is that how we get knowledge is a really important discussion. And one thing about the scientific method is that it's never perfect, we can say that, because it's always upgrading. So if we can find a source of revealed knowledge, coming from someone who's got the vision far, far beyond, our limited senses, ultimately from Krishna, then we can understand that that knowledge is perfect. And then it's just a matter of trying to understand how to apply that from the point of view of our limited perception of things. But just to explain about this important element of authority, it's applied even today in modern science. And I think this is quite important to understand. Sariputta Prabhu, he wrote a really interesting article describing Bhakti in comparison to physics, let's say. He explains it like this. And this is similar to the process we follow in Krishna consciousness. So suppose you want to become a physicist, or no, let's say you have doubt. Is there really such a thing as an atom? Does it really exist? The scientists have been telling me, but I'm not sure if I believe them. So I want to prove it for myself. So how will I do that? Well, the first thing is you have to have at least a little bit of faith that the scientists are probably telling the truth, or at least that they are possibly telling the truth, or that they are telling part of the truth, or whatever. We have to have a little bit of faith that they might know something about what they're talking about. So then what we do is we enroll in the university. Of course, there's the prerequisites of going to primary and intermediate, secondary, whatever. But we come to the university with a little bit of faith that the scientists can teach us about the elements and the atom and so on. So first of all, we need to have some preliminary understanding, because we can't just enroll in the university and immediately they'll take us to the proton accelerator, and they'll do some experiment and then they'll say, see, the atom exists, because you can't just look through a microscope and see an atom, I don't think. But you just, whether my factual points are accurate is not really the idea here. It's the idea of understanding, very advanced subject matters and how it's proven. Maybe we want to talk about electrons or some subatomic particles or whatever. So we go to the university and we're not able to, we won't be given access to the equipment to prove these high-level things. We'll not know how to use the equipment. And finally, we won't be able to interpret the results if we do the experiments. So therefore, we have to go through the preliminary training. And what do the scientists do? They say, well, do this experiment. If you combine these two substances, it'll produce a result. So you do it. You put the oxygen and the hydrogen, you put it together, you ignite them, and water comes out. Oh, okay, they told me that's what was going to happen. We had an explosion and water came. Okay, well, they told me that. I did it and it worked. I have some more faith. And so the process continues, that the scientists that are teaching us will give us some more experiments to do that build on the knowledge that we already have and help to increase our understanding of what's going on. Until finally, if you choose to follow the process to that extent, you'll be given access to the proton accelerator or whatever, some very sophisticated equipment, and you will have the understanding and the background knowledge to be able to use the equipment, and you'll also have the understanding to understand the results that you get from this experiment. So you use a proton accelerator and a little blip comes on the screen, you go, aha, now I have been convinced that the atom really does exist because I've done it through my own experimentation. But it wasn't an instant thing. You had to go through a whole process of training. So you had the background knowledge, you had the skills, and the understanding of how to interpret the results. So now, in order to become an expert and to really understand any of these subjects, this takes time. It's not like someone can sign up for a 1-hour webinar and then they get access to a proton accelerator and they can do these experiments. No, this takes decades practically. It takes many, many years to be able to do this. So this creates a problem, because if we want to understand everything in the world, we don't have enough lifespan to be able to do that. If we want to know everything about the atom, okay, well, there's 10 years of your life gone. In the meantime, in those 10 years, you haven't been able to find out all about medicine. You haven't been able to find out all about astronomy. You haven't been able to find out all about psychology and about economics and, all the other different fields of knowledge that can be studied. So it's not possible for every person to be an expert in everything. The Prabhupada said that it's good to know a little bit of everything and everything about something. So this is the practical way, that we have a broad understanding of things and that we become an expert in one particular thing. So where that leaves us is that even in the world of science, most of the people don't know what they're talking about. So I'm sort of saying that partially jokingly, but what it means is that if I'm an expert in understanding about atoms, then the other scientists who are experts in other areas, they will trust me because they know that I've followed the standard process of the academic system, and that I've been recognized by the previous authorities, that I've followed the proper process. I have the certification, I have my postdoctorate, papers published, and they've been peer reviewed, and these sort of things. So I'm given credibility on that basis. And the other scientists will generally accept what I've presented, because unless they are also an expert in that specific field, they won't really be able to scrutinizingly analyze what I've stated. In general, as long as the peers of that person have agreed with the statement of the expert, the others in the other fields will say, oh, that person's the expert and this is what they have to say, so I'll generally follow their opinion. The consensus, they'll say. It's that scientist and the other scientists have also agreed, so therefore, the practical thing is to accept what they have said. And in the same way, it goes for other fields of knowledge. I might be the expert in the atom, therefore, along with my peers. So then the scientists in the field of biology, medicine, or other fields, they'll just accept that this is the authority, this is the understanding we have today, this is the best knowledge that we have. So this is the same principle that Arjuna is applying here, that he's seeing that these great souls, Narada, Asita, Devala, Vyas, they are recognized by their peers, the followers of the Vedas, as people who have gone through the proper process, who have their conclusions are consistent with the findings of the other Vedic scientists and consistent with the body of Vedic knowledge, and therefore we accept their authority. Now we have to be careful here. Again, this is coming back to who do we accept as an authority, because some people might put themselves forward that, oh yes, I am an authority on this, and then they find a few people who, okay, there's another comment here, I'll put it up in a second. So then there's a we have to be very careful who we accept as an authority. Now, Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyas, they're highly recognized Vedic authorities, whereas it's possible that someone could come and say, oh, I am a Vedic authority and the understanding is this. And, Prabhupada was particularly warning us against impersonalism and voidism as things that people might come up and claim to be talking from the Vedas, but they twist the meaning towards impersonalism and voidism. And therefore, it's very important that Jiva Goswami and other of our acharyas, Baladeva, Jabhushana, and so on, have written very elaborate philosophical works to justify, based on the Vedas, their teachings. In the Vedic culture, the Vedas are the law books, you could say. So whatever someone argues, it has to be supported by the Vedas. And so Jiva Goswami and others have written very philosophical works to justify, first of all, justifying the fact that the Vedas and Srimad Bhagavatam is our ultimate source of knowledge, and then also the conclusion of this Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya is bona fide. It's not just a concoction or someone's idea. So all these things are very important, and it's the same thing in the modern science, that someone could just come up with some theory and say, oh yeah, this is my idea. And a very important element of science, when I say trust the science, an important element in science is to be able to debate. And this is the same in the Vedic knowledge, that debate was a very important element of the culture. That if someone had a different idea, then they needed to debate it. And on the basis of the Vedas, they would, Vedas and also logic, they would discuss points to, come to a conclusion. Now, there can be some points where, it can be very hard to make a definitive decision on things. But at least we present the evidence that we can get from the Vedas and logic, and do our best to understand things from many points of view. But it wasn't like they would say, oh, I have the right understanding, no one can question it. If anyone tries to say anything different to me, they'll be shot, or something like that. They'll be kicked out. No, it was a very open society where it's like, okay, you have a different idea, you come, we debate, and they have this open and robust system for discussion. And that's one of the issues that we face today, is that, as I spoke before about having peer-reviewed knowledge. Unfortunately, today there's a lot of influence from big media, big companies that have a vested interest. They fund the research. And so when someone is researching something, they are very cautious about presenting findings that go against the interest of the company that's funding the research, because they know that they'll lose their funding. And so therefore you have a compromised institution where the peers are compromised. And if they find that someone's presenting something that threatens their livelihood, it creates, consciously or subconsciously, a bias towards not accepting it. Even aside from the direct conflict of interest, many times in human psychology, there's a tendency that people have a particular view on something. And if someone presents an idea which is very radically different, it can be a great challenge to accept it. And going back to kind of like the flat earth and that kind of thing, it was understood that the earth was the center of the universe and that everything rotated around it. That was the general understanding. And then some other scientists, they were presenting that the sun was the center. And if someone didn't accept this idea, or if someone was presenting that the sun was the earth rotated around the sun, they were literally killed, because it was considered to be against the Bible and things like that. And then in the course of time, that became the established view. And if anyone presents the opposite view, now they're considered the weirdos. So this is the nature of science, that, what's considered black one day is considered white the next day, that the opinion can change very drastically. And we can see certainly in our social point of view, corporal punishment was considered normal. Now it's considered barbaric. Homosexuality was considered to be demoniac, and now it's considered just a particular way that a person's born. So we can see how things can change a lot throughout time, backwards and forwards. And if there's an idea that's deeply entrenched in a group of people, it's very hard to change their opinion, even when given evidence. So this is one of the factors, is that once we've kind of made up our mind about something, it can be very hard for it to be changed despite evidence. And another problem is, as I was saying, there can be direct conflicts of interest. There can be not just an innocent belief in something that may not be true, but there can be vested interests that we want people to believe things in this particular way, because that way we can make more money, for our business. And so that's something to be aware of as well, that when, particularly in modern times, we've got the controversy about the vaccine, for example, and about this virus, that there are some people who say that, we should only accept peer-reviewed papers. And in general, it's a good principle. However, what's happening due to vested interest of the pharmaceutical companies is often papers are not being published that may contradict the pharmaceuticals' point of view, or ones that are presented are met with great resistance because, it's a threat to the funding. So that's just something to keep in mind, that when we read the papers, we need to just bear in mind that there could be a bias towards these things. Another factor when it comes to peer review is that those that are presenting a view which is not the mainstream view have been cast out. And so they're no longer part of the peer review process. And if they are presenting a different idea, they don't have the opportunity for it to be accepted because the peers won't listen. And they also don't have the opportunity to critique the papers because they're not considered as part of the peers, circle. So that's also a factor to consider. That if we only consider peer-reviewed papers that are, influenced by vested interest, conflict of interest, we may not get a full picture. And therefore, it can be helpful to look at alternative points of view that are not within the peer-reviewed, realm of knowledge, and just assess it on their merits. Because we can see, just like the example, everyone was saying that the Earth was the center, and a few radical people were saying that the sun was the center. And eventually, those radical people, their ideas got listened to, and it became the mainstream. Now, whether that's true or not is another discussion. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. But the point is that we should also be open-minded to ideas that are outside of our limited range of thinking. And the same thing can also apply in Krishna consciousness, that we may be in a circle of friends or a group of devotees that have a particular view on something. But every now and then, it's not a bad idea to sort of step back and say, well, there's others that have a different opinion. Let me listen and see, what is their view? How do they come to that conclusion? And is there any validity to it? Because the sort of problems that universities are facing with these peer reviews, the same sort of problems we can also face in a spiritual organization. When we talk about conflict of interest, we can talk about, we can see that who are funding the temples, who's funding the movement, and could that be influencing the way that we speak and the way that we present Krishna consciousness? Is it possible that we are deviating in our practice or even in our philosophy to please those who are funding the movement? That's something to consider as well. Or could it also be that devotees have got into a particular way of thinking which is entrenched, and maybe we're missing out by not opening our mind and looking at things from another point of view, or having open debates on things so that we can really assess things in a more broad-minded way. And if we just shut down people who don't support the official position, is that really helping us to come to a proper resolution or a proper understanding of what is really happening? And coming to a proper solution. Yeah, so this is just a few points here about accepting authority. Who do we accept as an authority? And we do have to question this. Okay, I'm accepting these people as an authority, but do they have vested interests? Are they potentially not at the platform of Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyas, and maybe they may make mistakes and so on. So that's just some points here. I'll just hide the thing here, and I'll open up this comment from, here we go, Abhay Charan Prabhu. When devotees take an absolute position on contentious polemic issues, they risk alienating those who disagree. Yeah, totally. On the issue of vaccination, the overwhelming majority of the world population supports vaccination. Therefore, taking an opposing stand, so I can't read this now. How do I make it visible? I'm going to try again. No, I can't see the whole thing. Just a minute. I'll read it on the side. I can see more. Therefore, taking an opposing stand makes ISKCON appear to be just another unhinged conspiracy theorist. It's preferable to speak what the acharyas have spoken on Bhakti Yoga and avoid these mundane material issues that ultimately have nothing to do with spiritual life. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So yeah, let's just go down one by one. When devotees take an absolute position on contentious polemic issues, they risk alienating those who disagree. Yeah, well, we can see in our Krishna consciousness movement from a institutional point of view. The official position is that the society doesn't have a position, and that it's up to each individual to decide for themselves whether they should be vetted or not. However, although that's the official position, stated position, we can see from the actions of the society that that is not their position, that the position is that they support vaccination. Because the GBC, Strategic Planning Team, which is an officially body of the GBC, is continually sending out information which is reinforcing the idea that vaccination is important, that this COVID-19 disease is a very dangerous disease that everyone should be afraid of, and so on. So although officially they are stating that they are not taking a position, because they're not presenting both sides of this understanding, or when I say both, I don't like that word actually, looking at it from different angles of vision, there's not just two points of view on this, then it shows that they have a position. And they are alienating devotees who have a different view from the point of view that they are pushing through their media. So it's true that when there's a stand that's taken, it can alienate others. So what's the solution? The solution is that we provide an open forum to discuss about this, because now you've said here that ultimately these things have nothing to do with spiritual life. Well, everything has to do with spiritual life. The food that we eat has to do with spiritual life. The way that we live our life, we communicate with each other. All of these factors affect our spiritual life. And so what we need to do is we need to look at every situation and analyze it through the lens of Krishna consciousness. It's not that it's got nothing to do with spiritual life. Everything's connected. There's nothing which is not connected to Krishna. In fact, the definition of falgu vairagya, false renunciation, is seeing anything that's not connected to Krishna. And so these do need to be discussed. How should we understand this in relationship to Krishna consciousness? What does the Vedas have to say about disease? What does the Vedas have to say about vaccination as a principle, as a concept? About the way that these should be treated? What does the Vedas have to say about about the way that society should be run in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of forcing people to do medical procedures? Does the Vedas say anything about that? And perhaps it does, and perhaps it doesn't. Maybe there's some broad principles that we can apply to these things. And then if the Vedas, we may not be able to understand directly what it means. What is Prabhupada? What's Prabhupada's view on this topic? And it's quite clear that Prabhupada didn't trust modern medicine. And therefore, if we're putting all our faith in modern medicine, then is that consistent with what Prabhupada is teaching? You can see in TKG's diary, the end of Prabhupada's life, he said many times, and the conversations were very clear, that Prabhupada didn't have faith in these doctors, modern allopathic doctors. He had a little bit of faith in Ayurvedic doctors if they were genuine, but there are a lot of quacks in that area as well. And also, our understanding is that we're not this body. So we look after this body the best we can to serve Krishna, but we're not excessively afraid of death, because death is the gateway to going back to Krishna ultimately. And that's we're preparing ourselves for the time of death. We're not death. It's actually something that we ultimately, as Krishna consciousness, we can be looking forward to if we do play our cards right. But we're not afraid of death. Prabhupada said, look, don't bring the doctors. I don't want to go to the hospital. Let me just think of Krishna and die. and ultimately this is our conclusion. I know an example where, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before, but Steve Jobs, he had some kind of cancer, and he tried to treat it with natural treatment, and apparently it didn't really work. And in the end, he tried the chemotherapy, the more conventional medicine, and the doctors said that, oh, it's too late. We can't really treat it now. If you would have done it earlier, we would have had a better chance to succeed with our medicine. But because you didn't come to us and you tried the natural medicine, you die. At least this is what some people are saying. So you can see the mindset there is that it's all about, trying to prolong the life. But actually in Krishna consciousness, our goal is not to prolong the life. Our goal is to have a good death. Our goal is to become Krishna conscious. So at the time of death, we go back to Krishna. We're not excessively trying to stop ourselves from dying. The main thing is that we want to make sure that we live in a Krishna conscious way and that we can die in a Krishna conscious way. So it says, on the issue of vaccination, the overwhelming majority of the world population supports vaccination. Therefore, taking an opposing stance makes ISKCON appear to be just another unhinged conspiracy theorist. Okay, so there's quite a lot in this statement here. The overwhelming majority of the world population supports vaccination. The overwhelming majority of the world population are stupid as well, and they do all sorts of stupid things. In this material world, how many devotees of Krishna are there? Tiny, tiny minority. So if you want to use the same logic, this is called logic of argument by Vox Populi. Yeah, what the majority of people do must be right. Well, no, that's not accepted, because we can see Krishna consciousness is a minority of people. So I'll just leave that out. We don't care what the vast majority of people believe, but we rather consider what the facts are, and we rather see what the genuine authorities have to say about it. So naturally, there are very many scientists that have an opinion on this, and there's many that are also opposed to it. But because their voice is not heard, then we don't get to hear what they have to say. And so it seems like there's only the scientists all believe this one thing. The science says. Of course, there's no such thing as the science. There are different people with different views, but at this point, the ones who are in control, their viewpoint is being heard, and the others is being shut down. And as you're doing here, given a bad name and hung. It's, if you just call someone a conspiracy theorist, then people go, oh, they're a conspiracy theorist, I better not listen to them. Or in ISKCON, you can say, they're a Ritvik, better not listen to them. It's like, well, what do you mean by Ritvik exactly? What do you mean by conspiracy theorist? What if there is a conspiracy, and these people that are presenting these conspiracies are presenting something that's real? Instead of just out of hand, oh, they believe in conspiracies, there's something wrong with them. What about, I wonder if there's anything to it. Maybe there is a conspiracy. Maybe we should have a look into it. So, people might think that we look like conspiracy theorists, or they might think that we look like whatever. Well, that's not really the point. The point is that we need to try to hear from the genuine authorities, and we need to try to find the real facts and find the truth. And whatever labels people put on us is, not what we don't really care about that. So it's preferable to hear what the acharyas have spoken on Bhakti Yoga. Certainly, we don't want to hear what the modern scientists have to say on Bhakti Yoga or things like that. So we've already touched on this point. So we do want to hear what the acharyas have spoken on Bhakti Yoga, and they do bring up, some of these points. Ultimately, it's true that these things don't matter. Even there's a prayer of, is it Yamunacharya or one great acharya? He's saying that, my 3 times a day bath, my Gayatri chanting, my doing 5 sacrifices, and, all of these sort of obligations of religiosity. I'm sorry, I've given it up. I can't do it anymore because all I can do is chant. Now, I might be getting it a little bit wrong, but this is the thing that at the high level of devotional service, even chanting Gayatri or having a bath, daily baths and all these things that, are considered quite essential for us in the earlier stages. They don't care for those things because it's not, they're so absorbed in Krishna that all of the externals don't matter. Like the Nagababas, the Rishabh Dev type people of the world, the externals they totally don't even care about. Oh, so Shukadev Goswami, he was naked. He was walking around naked, beautiful 16-year-old young man. He's walking around naked and not disturbed and not worried about anything, because he's so absorbed in the spiritual life, all the externals don't matter. But as long as we are, particularly grihastas, just like it's described that when Shukadev Goswami walked past, the girls didn't even cover themselves. They weren't even worried. But when Vyasadeva came, and he was like an old man, when he came, they covered themselves because he was a grihasta and he was dealing in this world of, men and women and, different material considerations. So we can understand from that pastime that, we can understand from that pastime that if we are a grihasta and we're dealing in the world, then we have to deal with those things. And we have to understand it from the point of view of Krishna consciousness. And when Prabhupada told us that half his work is not done, he wants to establish Varnashram. You can argue that, Varnashram is just external, that's nothing to do with spiritual life. From one point of view, it's external, but it can be very helpful in our Krishna consciousness. And that's why Prabhupada was warning us, don't get involved. He basically told us, become like the Amish, don't get involved in the government, don't get involved in the education system, and don't get involved in the demoniac health system, medical system. As far as health goes, if we get sick and we have nowhere else to turn, what to do? We have to go to a doctor. But in general, we want to go out of the cities and try to live in the country and live a natural life, so we don't have to get involved in all this ugra karma, consumerism and technology and modern things that are causing so many problems. He wanted us to go to the country, protect cows, grow our own food, and really have a totally separate and alternative way of life. And from there, we can go out and preach, and people will also become attracted and come here to see that Krishna consciousness is a natural way of life. So just to summarize on the question again, we shouldn't really care what other people think. The truth is more important than what people think. And it's true, we should not take absolute positions on things in the sense of just taking a position. We should be able to debate things and discuss and then come to a conclusion based on rigid debate. And we shouldn't shut anyone out that has a different point of view. If we are feeling strong in our position on something, then we should be ready to debate it and discuss the facts of the matter. And then, we can all come closer to the truth in that way, not to shut down those that have a different point of view. And then ultimately, everything that we do in this life is connected to Krishna consciousness. And therefore, we should look at everything that's happening from the viewpoint of Krishna consciousness and, accordingly decide how much time and energy we should put into it, of course. Some things we may consider very briefly and, quickly come to a conclusion that we don't need to spend more time on it. And other things we should look into more deeply because it may have a bigger impact on our life as a devotee of Krishna. So, yeah, this is all stemming from this Bhagavad Gita here. We'll just go back here. freedom to practice Krishna consciousness. And if that freedom is being taken away, we need to take action. And for me, this is the main thing, this discussion about the vaccine and not the vaccine, whether, it's a good medicine or not a good medicine. For me, the bigger issue is, what are the consequences for devotees to practice Krishna consciousness? If the government is going to create a social credit system which limits what people can do and punishes people that don't fit in with the government's value system, it creates a very dangerous position for the freedom of devotees to practice Krishna consciousness. So this is something, to be aware of as well. But anyway, just to conclude, let's do our best to understand Krishna consciousness through what Srila Prabhupada has taught and our previous acharyas, so that we can have the best understanding of Krishna consciousness that we can apply in the best possible way for the Krishna consciousness of ourselves and everybody we meet. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.